All right, here we go. Back again. Want to talk this week about humanity. Spent a lot of time talking to people recently about humanity. Um, One of the things that bothers me a lot when I talk to Christians or hearing Christians talk about themselves and saying things like I'm not worthy and I deserve God's wrath and I have nothing to offer, um, and they say these things out of what they've been taught is humility. We need to be humble um, and I don't deny that. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't be humble. Humility is important um, human virtue, but I don't think that's what is meant by be humble before your God and that kind of stuff. Um, so one of the things that I talk a lot about, and I say it all the time, is that I'm amazing. Okay, um, I'm brilliant. Um, I'm good at everything I do, um, and I have a lot to offer. And I say those things in full recognition that it's not because of anything that I do. It's not me that makes me great. I'm great because God created me. So in a sense, I'm great because I come from a great creator. And to deny my greatness, to deny my abilities as a human being, to deny that I'm worthy and I have value, and that I am an important piece of God's creation, is to deny God. And so when we start talking about being humble and what is humility and um, it's recognizing that you are an amazing human being that was created to do amazing things, but recognizing it's not because of anything that you did. It's because that's the way God created you, because God's greatness is inside of you. So it's not you that's great, it's him, but you're great when you allow him to work and live and move through you and what it is that you do. And so, because one of the things that it just becomes so prevalent, like we hear these worship songs and some of these old hymns, and I'm not quoting the exact lyrics, but basically it's oh, I deserve your wrath, I deserve to die, I deserve to be punished in hell for all of eternity. I'm not worthy of your grace. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I just don't think that's accurate. If I didn't deserve God's grace, then why would he have created me in his grace? If I didn't deserve God's love, why would he have loved me enough to have created me? And when we start to think about things in these terms, it changes a lot of things. Like, I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but when we talk about things like mental health and mental illness, I have to believe some of our Christian teaching plays into that. When we talk about these kids that are growing up with very, very low self-esteem, not a whole lot of self-worth. Why? Because they've been told their whole life, especially if they go to church, that they're nothing. They're completely and totally depraved, that they can do nothing to please God, and that, apart from Jesus, they have absolutely no value as a human being. And I don't think that's accurate. I think we have a great amount of value. If we didn't have value, if we weren't worthy, if we weren't holders of greatness, then why would God have died on a cross for us? And that's something that I just can't wrap my mind around. God didn't die for something that didn't have value. God died for you because you have a great amount of value. You're worthy of his death. You're worthy of his grace. You're worthy of his love. Because that's what he created you in. He created you for those purposes. And so when we start thinking about the world and what the world does, is the world's job, the world is to strip us of all of that. The world is to try to convince us that we don't have any value, that we're not worthy, that we're nothing, and we should just succumb to our situations, or succumb to our circumstances in the world. And the problem is that so many Christian churches are teaching worldly theology masked as Christian theology. The entire teaching of total depravity bothers me. And I understand that you can find scriptures to support it. That's fine. You can find scriptures to support a lot of things. Once again, last week I think we talked a lot about having a conclusion and then going and searching for your evidence. And when you want to prove total depravity, and you start with, we are completely and totally depraved, we can do nothing that is pleasing to God, and we have, we're worthless. I can go in the Bible and I can find passages to support that in the New and the Old Testament. But in the context of the entirety of Scripture, the plenary authority of the story that starts in Genesis and ends in Revelation, that's not the story, because we see the great lengths that God has gone through to bring us back into reconciliation with him. And he wouldn't have done that if we were completely and totally depraved. He wouldn't have done that if we had no value. He wouldn't have done that if we were worthless. And so I think one of our biggest objectives as Christian people is to start placing more value in ourselves, to start recognizing our greatness, to start looking inside of ourselves and saying, I am an amazing human being. I am good. I can do anything I want to do. And we tell our kids that all the time. You can be anything you want to be when you grow up. But we don't really mean it. We don't. And so we really want to start telling people, look, you are so valuable. You have so much worth. You are so amazing in your being that Jesus Christ, God himself, became incarnate as a man and allowed himself to be nailed to the cross for your salvation. That's how much value you have. God allowed himself to be killed for you. He wouldn't have done that if you weren't worthy. He wouldn't have done that if you had no value. And so I really think we really need to start shifting our focus and really come to understand what humility really is. Humility is not denying my gifts. Humility is not this, I could never do that. I'm not good at anything. I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not. That's all false humanity. I'm not saying false humility. I'm saying it's false humanity. Because you are good enough. And you do have the ability to do those things. We just really want to get to a point where we can start pulling that out, because I look at it, generations of kids that have grown up and they have no self-esteem. They have no self-value. They have no self-worth. And I got to think that comes from something. And I understand it comes from a multitude of areas. I understand the world is really good at convincing kids that they're nothing. And we bully and we pick on kids, and they get made fun of if they don't have good enough clothes, and they get picked on if they're not good enough at sports, and I understand all that. But then those same kids might go to a church and they're told that they're depraved, they're not good enough, that they have to change everything about themselves in order to be accepted by God. And that's one of the most fascinating things to me about our world and mental health, is the church tells people, once again, this is not the language that the church uses, but it just might be the language that people hear. We talked about language a few weeks ago. Language is important, and its perception becomes the reality. So it's not the reality of what we say, but if that's what people are perceiving us to say, is what we're saying. And what people might be perceiving us to say is that you're not acceptable the way you are. You have to change. Not even God can accept you the way you are. You have to repent. You have to confess your sins. You have to convert. You have to become a Christian. You have to, you have to say these prayers. You have to believe in this thing, and then you have to do these classes, and you have to go to this building once a week, and you have to give this much money, and you have to wear this kind of clothing, and then God will accept you for who you are. But he can only do that because of Jesus. And that's, go off on another rant, because that's when we get into our atonement theory. And the substitutionary, is penal substitutionary atonement theory that is just so devastating to Christian churches. And it's just so fabricated. It's not true. It's not biblical. I forget the guy's name. Right now we're doing a Bible study here at our church, and the guy that's teaching it, went through, and he's showing these scholars that believe in penal substitutionary atonement saying that they don't have biblical evidence to support it. And so one of the ways that I've talked about and tried to get people to see this penal substitution, because basically what we say is that we're sinners, we're completely and totally depraved. God can't even look at us because we're so bad. And there's, once again, you're not acceptable to God. God cannot accept you the way that you are because you're completely and totally depraved. But then Jesus comes and Jesus steps in and says, I'll take their punishment, Father. Don't punish them. Punish me. And pour your wrath out onto me. And then if they believe that I did these things for them, if they believe this, then you forgive them and allow them to come into your presence. Not now. That's a future thing again. Once again, that's a whole nother topic for another day. You can check out my sermon from this past Sunday. And so God agrees, and God says, okay, yeah, I won't punish these people. I'll punish you for them, and I'll pour my wrath out onto you that they deserve. And then if they believe that you did it, I won't pour my wrath out onto them by torturing them in this fire pit of hell for all of eternity, which, once again, because penal substitutionary atonement people tend to think in this literal fire pit of eternal tormenting hell. But if God extinguishes his wrath on Jesus, how does he have any wrath left for hell? But once again, that's just asking too many questions and using logic and following things to a logical conclusion, which sometimes people don't like to do. But anyway, so one of the ways that I talk about it, I say, look, you got to understand that theory. I try to put things in our language and situations that we can understand. A lot of us can understand an abusive, angry father. Either we had one ourselves, or we know somebody who did, or we can even have seen it on a movie. But penal substitutionary atonement says that you're a kid, and your dad's drunk, and he's angry, and he wants to beat on somebody. And so he's going to come beat on you. And he's coming up the stairs trying to find you. You're hiding under the bed, terrified that dad's about to start whooping on you. And then right as he's about to snatch you out from underneath the bed and start beating on you, Mom jumps in front of him. And Mom takes the beating for you. And that's penal substitutionary atonement. Because Dad's satisfied because his wrath, his anger has been poured out. Mom's satisfied because her children didn't get beat. But yet you're still sitting underneath the bed, terrified, confused, and angry about why Dad was so mad in the first place. And when we look at our world and we look at our Christian churches, that's why we're so angry. That's why we can support some of the politicians that we support. That's why we can support some of the things that we support. Because we don't understand God. We don't understand why he wants to torture us in hell for all of eternity. He doesn't understand why we're completely and totally depraved. Because like that kid hiding underneath the bed, we have no idea what we did wrong. We've been told our whole lives, well, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner. You make bad decisions. You mess up and you do things that are wrong. You make mistakes. And yeah, we do. But is that always our fault? Once again, I'm not taking all the blame away. I understand that I do make mistakes. But I make decisions based upon the information that I have. And if I have faulty information, I'm going to make bad decisions. I mean, you look at when we were going to invade Iraq in 2003. That's been looked upon now as a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. But the information that we had at that time said that he did. And so we went to war based upon faulty information. So yes, at the time we went into Iraq, it wasn't a mistake because we were going in based upon this information. We later on found out that that information was wrong. And so it was a mistake. And so as a human being who's living in the world, I'm born into this world. I'm born into the family I'm born in. I'm born into the culture, the neighborhood, the society. And that world, once again, I've said this several times, begins to mold us and shape us in its image. And so the decisions that I'm making are based upon the information that I have of my world. And that might be faulty information. So my decision to start drinking might be based upon the fact that the people who I see drinking are having a fun time. And so I'm thinking, well, if I want to have fun, I have to drink. Because everybody that I know drinks, and everybody that I know has fun when they drink. I have a decision to start doing drugs. Everybody around me does drugs. Doing drugs is normal. I'm supposed to do drugs. Everybody does it. I mean, I was like 22 or 23 years old before I met people who didn't do drugs. That's crazy to think about, but it's true. And so, yeah, I mess up. But the decisions that I'm making, the wrong decisions because I have wrong information, because I'm getting my information from the world, which is not, it's like you're gonna you're writing a research project and you're sourcing, you're using Wikipedia as a source. Your source doesn't have credibility. I'm making choices in my life as a member of the world based upon faulty information, based upon bad research. Is that my fault? Did I choose to get born into this world? Did I choose to get born into my family? Did I choose to get born into the community I was born in? Did I choose to get born into the environment that I was born into? So why am I being punished? So I'm born in Syria, and my government is dropping sarin gas on me, and at the same time they're dropping sarin gas on my village. They're also bombing the hospital, so I have nowhere to go to attempt to save my life. Right? I didn't choose to be born into Syria. I didn't choose to be born as a Muslim. But I'm going to burn in hell for all of eternity because I wasn't a Christian. Because God's angry at me because I was born in a Muslim country. Because once again, God created me. God put me in the stomach, in the womb of a Muslim woman, but yet he hates me. He's going to delight in torturing me in hell for all of eternity because I was born in Syria? What kind of sense does that make? What kind of God is that? And so once again, we fall in these things to a logical conclusion, and we wonder why people have problems with self-esteem and self-image and self-worth and self-respect. Because we're told from day one, you're bad. You're no good. God can't even accept you the way that you are. because of substitutionary atonement, the penal substitutionary atonement theory. That's what it does. And that's one of the reasons I'm so against it and trying to move away from it, because I've seen that it's stripping our value. It's stripping our worth from us, because we're going to get punished. Jesus is taking this punishment for me for what? Why am I being punished to begin with? Because, my parents were sinners. So I'm going to be punished because my parents were sinners? But their parents were sinners. And their parents were sinners. And their parents were sinners. And it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. I'm going to get punished because they ate of this fruit? They never asked my opinion. They didn't consult with me and say, hey, do you think we should eat this or not? They did it. When I was in the military, one of the things they started moving away from was mass punishment. Because when, in basic training and those types of things, is one person messed up, the whole platoon got punished. And, we got to our duty stations, and I was in the Army. I had this one, Sergeant Morrison. I love that guy, but man, he was old school. And, one guy and our platoon would mess up, and we all got punished. I remember we were out in a parking lot marching in place at 5:30 in the morning because one kid couldn't get the formation on time. And so we were all punished because one person couldn't do what they were supposed to do. And they tried to, obviously the Army wanted to get away from that, because we recognize that that's cruel. That's inhumane. It's not, you can't do that. It's not fair. But we believe that God does that. We believe that God is unjust. We believe that God is unfair. Once again, no Christian would ever use that language, but it's what we say when we say you're going to get damned for all of eternity in this fire pit of hell because you're a terrible sinner, totally, completely depraved, because somebody else messed up. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'm a sinner, and I fully admit that, and I make mistakes. But the reason I make mistakes is because I have bad information. I'm still human. I'm living in the world, and sometimes my humanity creeps into my mind, and it tries to persuade me that it's not my humanity, and it's God trying to get me to do something that maybe I shouldn't be doing. And so I make that decision. And later on I find out, that wasn't the right decision. I shouldn't have done that. But I'm still amazing. I still have great value. I'm still worthy of Jesus' death. But I do fully recognize that without Jesus' death, I am nothing. I'm just a lost soul in the world trying to figure out what this is all about. But because Jesus died, because Jesus was buried, because Jesus resurrected, I now have a path to get back to be the person that I was created to be. I have a path to get back to my greatness. I have a path to get back to the value that God instilled in me when he created me in his image. So I'm not demeaning, I'm not devaluing the cross. I'm not devaluing the life and the death and the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm not devaluing any of that. But I am adding some more value to me, adding some value to you, that you do deserve what Jesus did for you. You do deserve to be God's child. You do deserve your greatness. And yes, you are an amazing human being that has a tremendous amount of value, because if you didn't, Jesus wouldn't have died for you.